Hello, Merry Christmas, and welcome to my new series, limited series. It's called The 12 Myths of Christmas. This is an idea I came up with a couple of years ago just to correct some misconceptions that people have about things concerning the holiday. When I originally wrote this list, I had 12 things that I wanted to talk about. Somewhere in the past couple of years, I have lost my original list, and when I tried to rewrite it, I only came up with 11, so I'm open to suggestions for a 12th item that you might want to add to the list to have me talk about. So if you've got an idea of something about Christmas that you want discussed, something, the origin of why we do things the way we do them, or so on, just something, questions about the holiday that you've wanted to know, put it down in the comments, and if it's not something that I've already planned to talk about, I may decide to go ahead and do that as well, or we can just even add on, to the end of it. Last year, I started doing this as a series of articles. So if you're on the Facebook page, just scroll on down quite a ways, and you'll find some of the articles I wrote last year. I never did finish it, but you'll see some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this series as well. So today we're going to start the series with something that's, not quite so serious, something that's a little more fun. We're going to look at some facts and misconceptions about Santa Claus. In America, we've got this idea of Santa Claus being this man, maybe a short, fat person, wears a suit that is trimmed with fur, wears a red suit that is trimmed with fur, and he rides around in a sleigh pulled by a reindeer through the sky, and he lands on our roof, and he comes down our chimney, and he puts presents under the tree, and he fills stockings. And, these are all things that we, often, most Americans will agree on about Santa Claus. Where these ideas come from? Well, most of the American ideas of Santa Claus actually come from just one major source. And no, it's not Coca-Cola. The one major source that we get most of our ideas about Santa Claus from is a poem written by Clement C. Moore back in the 1800s. And even this poem itself, there's a very big misconception about it. This poem is called A Visit from St. Nicholas. Most people, however, when they refer to it not by its title, but actually by its first line. "'Twas the night before Christmas." So we've already got, one kind of misconception there. But this is where we get a lot of our ideas about Santa Claus. Let me read the description of Santa Claus, or St. Nicholas, as he's called in the poem, and you'll see where our modern description of Santa Claus comes from. "He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke of it encircled his head like a wreath." Today, you're probably not going to see too many pictures of Santa Claus smoking a pipe, but if you go back even just 10, 20 years, that was still a fairly common thing that you would see in artwork about Santa Claus. "He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself." So here we see Santa Claus wearing the suit, carrying the bag of toys. An interesting thing, if you read through the poem, you find he doesn't actually put toys under the tree. All he does in the poem is fill the stockings. Originally, that's all that people did for Christmas. They would just fill their stockings. And the idea of putting presents under a tree actually came later when people started giving more extravagant gifts for Christmas. Originally, people didn't give a whole lot of big things. They just gave stuff that you could put in a stocking. Another interesting thing about this is where we get the idea of the beard and the hat and things like that as well. But there is a big misconception that a lot of people have. This poem is also the source of another big thing about Santa Claus, and that's his reindeer. This is where the names of Santa Claus's reindeer come from, but a lot of people actually get the name of one of the reindeer wrong when they talk about the names of the reindeer. Usually, when people list the names of Santa's reindeer, they know, there's Dasher and Dancer, Prancer and Vixen, Comet, Cupid, and Donner and Blitzen, right? Well, first of all, I've always had a problem with the name Vixen myself. Vixen is a female fox, so I don't know why he would name a reindeer that, but that's, what the poet decided. But if you read the poem carefully, you'll see that the next to last reindeer is not named Donner. Now, the name Donner would actually make a lot of sense. Donner and Blitzen is actually the German words for thunder and lightning. But if you look at the poem, if you look at the manuscripts written in his own handwriting, we see that Clement Moore actually named the next to last reindeer Donder, Donder. So most people today actually use the more sensible Donner, but that's not the name that the reindeer was originally given. There's another big thing that I first discovered when I was required to memorize this poem back in 7th grade English. Any of my high school friends, if y'all remember Miss Garner back in 7th grade, she required us to recite this poem to her. We had to memorize it and then get up to her desk and recite the poem to her. That's where I really first read this poem closely, and I noticed something about it. And the more I read it, the more I realize this is actually true. In the poem, at least, Santa's reindeer don't fly. They are never described as flying in the poem. Let's take a look carefully at what the poem says about how the reindeer come. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. So here we see all the narrator in the poem is saying is he sees a sleigh coming being pulled by reindeer. Now, back then, sleighs were fairly common. Actually, even in North countries today, in North Europe, sleighs are a common form of transportation. And when people back then thought of sleighs, they didn't think of sleighs flying through the air. So with nothing in the poem specifically saying that it was flying, the people at the time would not have imagined the sleigh as flying through the air. So where did this idea of flying reindeer come from? Well, I think people often misread the next few lines in the poem. Right after the reindeer are named, St. Nicholas says to the reindeer, "To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all." And then the next line, the narrator says, "As dry leaves before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too." There we see the word flew, but it's not describing flying the way we think of it. That first one of those lines there says, "As dry leaves before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky." And when you combine that with from the top of the porch to the top of the wall, what he's describing is leaves being blown along the ground by a wind, and then when they reach a wall, they go upward. If you you see a wind blowing leaves, when the leaves hit the wall, they'll suddenly move up. So what he's describing is the reindeer pulling the sleigh are coming along the ground, and then when they get to the wall of the house, they then go up the wall onto the roof. That's what he's actually describing in the poem. He's not describing the reindeer flying through the air and landing on the roof. So that's one of the misconceptions that we have here. And then at the very end of it, some people misquote it But I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight. A lot of people, when they recite the poem today, they'll say as he flew out of sight. That's not what the poem says. It says as he drove out of sight. So again, he's just driving away in a sleigh on the ground the way most people drive sleighs. And then even the very last line is often misquoted by a lot of people today. A lot of people say, Merry Christmas to all and to all a good night. The line is actually, and I know a lot of this is just nitpicky stuff, the line is actually Happy Christmas to all and to all a good night. So that's where our modern idea of Santa Claus comes from. The idea of Santa Claus flying through the air with his reindeer came later, and I think it came later because people have misinterpreted what the poem is actually saying. And somewhere along the line, they got the idea that Santa Claus just flies through the air. You can believe whatever you want. I'm not telling you that you're wrong in what you believe about Santa Claus. You can describe Santa Claus however I want to. One last thing I want to mention. I kind of in passing mentioned Coca-Cola before. Why did I say that? Well, in case you haven't heard, there's a rumor going around every year that Coca-Cola is responsible for Santa Claus wearing the red suit. That the reason that Santa Claus wears red is because of Coca-Cola ads. Now, let me just make a correction here. First of all, the poem does not say at all what color the suit that Santa Claus is wearing is. In artwork, up until about the turn of the last century, would show St. Nicholas, as he was usually called at that time. The name Santa Claus actually comes from the Dutch Sinterklaas. We kind of corrupted, or anglicized one of their names. But up until about the turn of the last century, Santa Claus was depicted as wearing any of a number of colors. Oftentimes he'd be wearing red, sometimes he'd be wearing blue, sometimes green, sometimes yellow, just whatever the artist wanted to depict. So Coca-Cola did not, or they were not the first to put Santa Claus in a red suit. In the early 1900s, Coca-Cola did do a series of ads featuring Santa Claus holding a Coke. And these ads became very popular. Many of you have probably seen some of these. And in these ads, Santa Claus was always wearing a red suit. And of course, the reason for that is because red is the color of Coca-Cola. So, Coca-Cola did not, however, invent the red suit for Santa Claus. He wore red in some artwork before that, even though he also wore other colors. But we can probably say with assurance that Coca-Cola did popularize the red suit. After that ad campaign, red was pretty much the only color you saw Santa Claus in. So even though Coke did not invent the red suit for Santa, they are the ones who are probably responsible for making that the exclusive color of Santa today. So I hope this has been entertaining and educational for you. I would like to release a new video every weekday. Don't hold me to that. You know how I am sometimes. Tomorrow, I hope to be back with a video on a different topic, another misconception about Christmas. Again, if you have any ideas, please put them in the comments, and if I like it, I may decide to talk about it. And please subscribe and hit the notification button so that way you can be notified when a new video comes out. Again, I hope to be able to put a new one out every day. So until next time, thanks for watching.